This is the first week of a new series of things we're looking at under the theme of stewardship. And tonight we're looking at feasting and fasting. And I want to do that by looking a little bit at the story of Daniel and then at the words of Jesus. So I want to read a little bit from Daniel chapter 1. If you remember, Daniel has been taken captive along with all of his nation, and he's ended up in serving the king. So he's in the king's palace, and as a result of that, he's going to have a very nice life. However, the food he's going to be eating is something that he feels he cannot bring himself to consume. So this is from Daniel chapter 1, and I'm going to read from verse 8. Daniel decided not to defile himself with the royal food and wine, and he asked the chief official for permission not to defile himself this way. Now God had caused the official to show favour and compassion to Daniel, but the official told Daniel, "I'm afraid of my lord the king, who has assigned your food and drink. Why should he see you looking worse than the other young men of your age? The king would then have my head because of you." Daniel then said to the guard whom the chief official had appointed over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, "Please test your servants for 10 days. Give us nothing but vegetables to eat and water to drink. Then compare our appearance to that of the young men who eat the royal food, and treat your servants in accordance with what you see." So he agreed to this and tested them for 10 days. Then in Matthew 6, Jesus said, "When you fast, do not look somber as the hypocrites do, for they disfigure their faces to show others they are fasting. Truly I tell you, they have received their reward in full. But when you fast, put oil on your head and wash your face, so that it will not be obvious to others that you are fasting, but only to your Father who is unseen. And your Father, who sees what is done in secret, will reward you." I wonder whether you have ever had an occasion where you have fasted. Some of the major Christian denominations in this country will do it as part of ordination at significant points in life. Some people have found fasting helpful when they face difficult situations. Some people do it just as a spiritual discipline, as they think denying themselves in this way gives them opportunity to focus on God. And perhaps we have experience about fasting that we could share. Daniel had landed really on his feet, you would think, taken off as a slave and ending up in the king's palace. So he's got all this opportunity and all this lovely food to eat. But there's a problem. The Babylonians loved to eat pork and horses, which is contrary to what the Bible says in Leviticus. It's also quite possible that the blood was not drained from the meat, which is also against the Jewish law. And further to this, the food was dedicated to pagan deities. And although that's not expressly forbidden in the law, Daniel obviously felt it was something that he could not do. Did it really matter? We ask ourselves. Would it have mattered? What would we say if we were faced with those sorts of things? Would we have ate the food or would we have not ate the food? You can answer that question for yourselves. But Daniel said no, he couldn't do this because he would need to honor God. All the way through the Old Testament, there were all sorts of dietary rules. They go right back to Genesis. You shan't eat from the tree, and they go on and on through into the law. And the whole idea of it at the end is that people have to decide what is clean and what is unclean. And that's a difficult concept for us today. We might look at Daniel and we might say, well, that's rather silly, really, denying yourself that fine meat and the fine wines that were on offer. But perhaps I wonder whether there are other characteristics today that perhaps we're feasting on that we ought to be abstaining from. I don't know. in my own lifetime, there's been a huge change in things. Notably, when I was a boy growing up, nobody in church drank alcohol. Absolutely nobody. But just about everybody smoked. Now it's exactly the other way round. Do these things change with time? What does it actually mean for us today to be good stewards when it comes to feasting and fasting? How much should we be aware of the needs of others? Jesus says that when we fast, when we deny ourselves, then we should do it in secret, and God will reward us in some way. I wonder what Jesus meant at another point where he said that if we would come after him, we must first deny ourselves and take up a cross and follow him. Is this about food, or is it about a whole manner of how we treat other people? It appears to me that Daniel fasted with the food because he wanted to honor God. And actually, whether we are feasting or fasting, perhaps the same is true for us today. We should honor God first and respond in an appropriate way when we're faced with these things. I hope we can find a few things to talk about from these two passages. Perhaps we can share a little bit about our experience of fasting, and perhaps a little bit about our experience of feasting. And perhaps we can think what it means to honor God today when it comes to food and what we do with it.